Have you ever had one of those quiet mornings where you're sitting with your coffee, maybe by the window, watching the light come in, and suddenly you feel a kind of heaviness you can't quite explain? Not pain exactly, not even sadness, just a weight. You start thinking about your children, wondering if they're really okay. You think about your health, about the future, about things you wish had turned out differently. And before you know it, that peaceful morning you were hoping for has quietly turned into another day filled with worry. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something right away. You are not alone. So many women, especially after 60, carry this invisible burden. You've spent decades caring for others, holding families together, making sacrifices no one even saw. And now, when life is supposed to feel a little lighter, a little calmer, it often doesn't. But here's the truth that doesn't get talked about enough. The peace you're looking for right now isn't going to come from doing more. It's not about fixing everything, solving everyone's problems, or staying constantly busy. Real peace, the kind that lets you breathe deeply and sleep soundly, comes from letting go of the things that quietly drain you. And today, I want to gently walk with you through 6 common mistakes that many women make after 60. Not because they're careless or unaware, but because these habits were once necessary. They helped you survive, raise a family, build a life. But now, they're holding you back. Let's begin with something that feels so normal. Most people don't even question it. Worrying about things you can't control. It sounds simple when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Of course, we shouldn't worry about things we can't control. But in real life, it's never that easy. Because when it comes to your children, your grandchildren, your health, your future, your heart doesn't ask for logic. It just worries. I remember a woman named Robert Thompson, well, everyone called him Bob, who once shared something that stayed with me. He was 72, a quiet man, the kind who always tried to stay strong for everyone else. One evening, he said, "I lie awake at night thinking about my son. His job isn't stable. The world feels uncertain. I keep thinking, what if something happens and I'm not there to help him?" And I gently asked him, "Bob, has your son faced hard times before?" He nodded. "And did he get through them?" Another nod. Then I said, "Then maybe your job now isn't to carry his worries, but to show him what peace looks like. You see, when you spend your days worrying about things outside your control, it doesn't actually protect the people you love. It doesn't change outcomes. It doesn't fix the future. All it does is take away the calm you deserve in the present. Your body feels it. Your shoulders stay tight. Your sleep becomes restless. Even your joy begins to shrink little by little. And after 60, your energy is too precious to spend it on things you cannot change. There is a quiet kind of wisdom in saying, "This is not mine to carry anymore." That doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It simply means you trust that the people you raised are strong enough to walk their own path, and more importantly, you give yourself permission to rest. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to choose peace over worry. Now, there's another habit that often shows up right alongside worry, and it can be just as exhausting: arguing, just to prove you're right. And this one can be a little harder to recognize, because it doesn't always feel like arguing. Sometimes it feels like explaining, or correcting, or just having a conversation. But deep down, there's a quiet need there. A need to be understood, to be respected, to feel like your experience still matters. And after everything you've lived through, of course it matters. But here's what happens so often. A simple conversation with your daughter turns into tension. You share your opinion about how she's raising her children or how she manages her home. You're not trying to hurt her, you're trying to help. But she hears criticism, and before you know it, both of you are holding your ground, voices getting a little sharper, hearts getting a little more distant. I once spoke with a woman named Susan Miller, 68 years old. She told me, "I used to argue with my daughter about everything, what she fed the kids, how she handled discipline, even how she decorated her house. I thought I was guiding her." She paused, then smiled softly. One day I realized I missed her laughter. I missed when we used to just sit and enjoy each other. And I couldn't remember the last time we did that without tension. So she made a quiet decision. She didn't stop caring. She didn't stop having opinions. She simply stopped needing to win. The next time her daughter did something she didn't agree with, she let it go. Not because she suddenly thought it was right, but because she realized something more important. Peace in a relationship is worth more than being right in a moment. And slowly, something changed. The conversations became lighter. The distance softened. The laughter came back. When you let go of the need to prove yourself, you create space for connection again. And at this stage in life, connection matters so much more than correction. You've already proven your wisdom through the life you've lived. You don't need to defend it in every conversation. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give the people you love is simply your presence without judgment. Because at the end of the day, being right doesn't bring peace, but being kind always does. And as we sit with that for a moment, there's another pattern that quietly shapes so many lives after 60, especially for women who have spent their entire lives putting others first. And that is the habit of living only for your children while slowly forgetting yourself. For so many years, your life had a clear purpose. You woke up thinking about what your children needed. You planned your days around their schedules, their meals, their school, their worries, their dreams. You gave your time, your energy, your patience, and often pieces of your own identity without even realizing it. And at that time, it made sense. That was love in action. That was responsibility. That was what a good mother did. But something changes after 60. Your children grow into their own lives. They have their own homes, their own responsibilities, their own decisions to make. And yet, inside your heart, the habit of putting them first doesn't just disappear overnight, so you keep showing up the same way. You worry about their problems as if they were your own. You offer help before they even ask. You rearrange your time to be available whenever they might need you. You step in again and again because that's what you've always done. But here's the part no one tells you. When you continue to live only for your children at this stage of life, something very quiet begins to happen. You start to disappear from your own life. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. You stop doing the things you once enjoyed. You put off your own plans. You tell yourself, "I'll rest later," or "This is more important right now." And slowly, your world becomes smaller than it needs to be. I remember a conversation with a man named James Walker, 70 years old. He said, "I gave everything to my son, helped him buy his home, watched the grandkids every weekend, handled things he didn't have time for, and now I barely hear from him unless he needs something." There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet confusion, a kind of emptiness. And I gently asked him, "When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I can't remember." That moment said everything. You see, when you give everything away for too long, you don't just lose energy, you lose connection with yourself. And the hardest part is, Your children may not even realize what you've given up, not because they don't care, but because they're simply living their own lives, just as you once hoped they would. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. In fact, one of the most powerful ways to love your family now is to show them what it looks like to live well, to be calm, to be fulfilled, to have your own rhythm, your own joys, your own sense of peace. When you begin to take your life back, even in small ways, you don't move further away from your children. You actually give them something deeper. You give them the comfort of knowing you are okay. You give them the example of how to grow older with dignity and independence. And most importantly, you give yourself the life you deserve in this chapter. Maybe that means taking a walk in the morning just because you want to. Maybe it means reconnecting with an old friend. Maybe it's picking up a hobby you once loved and quietly set aside. It doesn't have to be something big. It just has to be yours. Because after 60, your life is not meant to be a continuation of sacrifice. It's meant to be a rediscovery of yourself. And once you begin to feel that again, that sense of space, that gentle joy, something inside you softens. You're no longer waiting for someone else to bring meaning into your days. You begin creating it for yourself. And as that shift settles in, there's another pattern that often reveals itself. One that many people don't notice until it begins to disturb their peace in ways they didn't expect. It's the habit of sharing too much of your personal life. Now, this might sound surprising at first. After all, sharing is often seen as a way to connect, to feel supported, to lighten the emotional load. And in many ways, that's true. We all need someone to talk to. But after 60, there's a quiet kind of wisdom in choosing carefully what you share and who you share it with. Because not everyone who listens is there to understand. Some people listen to compare, some listen to judge, and some listen simply to collect pieces of your life that were never meant for them. I once knew a woman named Margaret Collins, 75 years old. She had a warm heart and an open nature. She believed in being honest and transparent, especially with the people around her. She would share details about her health, her finances, even disagreements within her family. She thought that by opening up, she would feel lighter. But over time, something changed. She began to notice that people were talking, small comments here and there, looks that felt different, conversations that carried a tone she couldn't quite place at first. And one day, she said to me, "I thought sharing would bring me closer to people, but it only made me feel more exposed." That realization stayed with her, and slowly, she began to change the way she moved through the world. She became more selective, more private, not distant, just wise. Because the truth is, your life, your experiences, your struggles, your plans, these are not things that need to be explained to everyone. There is a kind of strength in quiet living. You don't have to justify your choices. You don't have to reveal every concern. You don't have to make your personal life public just to feel connected. Sometimes, the most peaceful life is the one that is gently protected. A smaller circle, deeper trust, fewer words, but more meaning. And when you begin to protect your space in this way, you may notice something beautiful. Your mind feels calmer, your relationships feel clearer, and your sense of self becomes stronger because it's no longer shaped by outside opinions. As you hold on to that feeling, there's one more habit that often sits quietly beneath everything we've talked about so far. A habit that can slowly drain your energy without you even realizing it at first. And that habit is helping others at the cost of your own peace. Now, let me say this gently, because I know your heart. You have spent a lifetime being there for people. You've been the one others call when something breaks. when something hurts, when something falls apart. You've been dependable, generous, and strong, even on days when you didn't feel strong at all. And somewhere along the way, helping became part of who you are. So it makes sense that even now, after 60, you still feel that pull. Someone needs a ride, you say yes. Someone needs money, you find a way. Someone needs help with something that takes hours of your time. And again, you say yes. Not because you have nothing else to do, but because you care. But here's the quiet truth that many kind-hearted women never hear until much later. There is a difference between being kind and being used. And that line can become very blurry if you've spent most of your life putting others first. I remember speaking with a man named Edward Harris, 74 years old. He told me, "My neighbors call me for everything. Fixing things around the house, running errands, helping with little problems. I don't mind helping, but lately I feel tired all the time." I asked him, "When was the last time someone showed up for you?" He paused for a long moment. Then he said, "I can't remember." There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet realization, and that's often how it happens. You don't notice it at first. You keep giving because it feels natural. It feels right. It feels like the kind thing to do. But over time, something inside you begins to feel drained. Not because helping is wrong, but because you've forgotten to include yourself in the equation. After 60, your energy is not endless. Your time is not unlimited. And your peace is far too valuable to give away without care. Every time you say yes when your heart feels heavy, you take a little piece of that peace and hand it over. Every time you push through exhaustion just to meet someone else's needs, your body keeps the score. And eventually, you begin to feel it in your sleep, in your mood, in that quiet sense of resentment you may not even want to admit is there. But here's the shift that can change everything. You are allowed to say no, not harshly, not with guilt. Just honestly, not today. I'm not able to do that right now. I need some time for myself. These are not selfish words. They are protective ones, because the people who truly care about you will understand, and the ones who don't were never really valuing you the way you deserved in the first place. When you begin to set gentle boundaries, something powerful happens. Your energy starts to return, your days feel lighter, and the help you do choose to give comes from a place of joy, not obligation. That's the kind of giving that nourishes both you and the people around you. And as you begin to reclaim that space, there is one final piece to this journey. Something so simple, yet so often overlooked. It's the habit of ignoring your own happiness. Now, this one can be the most subtle of all, because it doesn't always feel like a mistake. It often feels like responsibility. You wake up, you follow your routine, you take care of what needs to be done. You move through your days quietly, without asking for much. And somewhere along the way, you stop checking in with yourself. You stop asking, what brings me joy now? Maybe there was a time when you loved painting, or gardening, or dancing, or simply sitting with a good book. Maybe you had little things that made your days feel alive, but over the years, those things slowly faded into the background. And now you tell yourself, that was for another time. But here's something I want you to hear clearly. Your happiness did not expire with age. It didn't belong only to your younger years. It didn't disappear just because your responsibilities changed. It's still there, waiting, quietly. I once met a woman named Patricia Anderson, 78 years old. She told me she used to love music. She would play the piano for hours when she was younger. But as life got busy, she stopped. Years passed, decades even. One day, she walked past an old piano at a community center. She paused, ran her fingers lightly over the keys, and something stirred inside her. She sat down and played a few simple notes. They weren't perfect, she told me later, smiling. But for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. That moment didn't change her entire life overnight, but it changed her days. She began going back, playing a little more each time. Not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, just to feel that quiet joy again. And that's all happiness really needs at this stage of life. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be real. A walk in the morning sun, a conversation that makes you laugh, a hobby that lets you lose track of time, a quiet cup of coffee where you're not thinking about anyone else's needs for just a moment. These small things, they add up. They bring color back into your days. They remind you that you are still here, not just existing, but living. And when you allow yourself to feel that again, something shifts deep inside. You stop measuring your worth by how much you do for others. You stop waiting for permission to enjoy your own life. You begin to understand that this chapter, this time between 60 and 80, is not a waiting room. It is a gift. A time to live more gently, more intentionally, more truthfully. So if there's one thing I hope you carry with you from this moment, it's this. You don't need to change everything all at once. Just start small. Let go of one worry. Choose silence instead of one argument. Take 1 hour for yourself. Say no when your heart feels tired. And do one thing, just one, that brings you a little bit of joy. Because those small choices, they shape your days. And your days, they shape your life. If something in this message spoke to you, I would truly love to hear from you. You can share your thoughts or your experience in the comments below. Sometimes your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you found comfort or value in this conversation, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel Elderly Faith Journey. It helps us continue creating content that supports and uplifts women just like you. Thank you for spending this time with me. And wherever you are in your journey, I hope you choose peace. I hope you choose yourself. And I hope you remember, your best years are not behind you. They are still here, waiting to be lived.